This is the moment you've all been waiting for. Live with the best father and son team on the internet. It's time for Homie and the Dude.
What is up, everyone? This is Homie and the Dude, the father and son MMA and TTRPG podcast, and we are the destination for the baddest, assest NPCs in the entire planet, realm, universe, wherever.
Planes?
Everywhere. Like, if you want an NPC, come to us. We might hook you up. We are absolutely ecstatic for many reasons. One is that we consider David Tilstra a budding friend of ours, so we're super excited to get to know you a little bit more. But David Tilstra is the DM from Afar Podcast, is also a voice actor, and we are also in a campaign together for the Underground Oracle playtest campaign. So we're all having a bunch of fun with that. But introducing you to David Tilstra. David, what is up?
Hello, thank you for having me here. I'm super excited to be here and talk to you guys and get to know y'all a little more, because like you said, that campaign, it's been wild so far. Like I love him to death, and all the twists and turns he's been throwing that story have been honestly amazing. So
I think it's definitely one of the funnest campaigns I've ever played, and it's one that I really look forward to on a regular basis. And do you know what's interesting? At some point, I'd love to talk to you about like Keith's style versus your style, and I'm a DM as well, like versus my style, and kind of, you know, like dissect that a little bit and get your opinion on how Keith kind of runs his games and what your thought is on all of that, because I think Keith's style is one that I've only really encountered once, in terms of I've never really seen any DMs that do things like he does, as well as also just a few other bits and bobs. But first of all, I wanted to pause for a second and rewind to a time earlier in your life, a long time ago, if you can humor me.
Thanks for watching this episode. We really appreciate you supporting Homie and the Dude.
Please hit us with the Holy Trinity, like our Facebook page, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and follow us on Instagram. Just search @Homie and the Dude. It all really helps. To a time when you were taking improv classes at SAK Comedy Club, Comedy Labs. Is that where this all started for you? Is this where this whole love began back there then when you were younger in your teen years?
Wow, yeah, I haven't thought about SAC in a while. Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I think that is. I've always been sort of just into the idea of like performing and acting and doing this sort of stuff. Like my mom, when I was growing up, my mom was like a director of like high school plays, and it's like not like community theater, but like just plays at our schools and occasionally around the community and stuff. So like when I was little, I would always go with her when she was like practicing with the actors, and I would just sit there and watch these people doing these improv exercises and performing and acting and stuff. And I always remember being just like, oh, that's really cool. And then I did a little bit of that growing up, but then in high school, I moved from Michigan to Florida between my freshman and sophomore year, and there was this comedy club down in Orlando that my cousins took me to, like my first weekend there, because I was all alone. I was like, oh, I don't know anybody, I don't know what to do. My cousins took me to this comedy club, and I remember sitting there being like, watching these improv actors like just make this stuff up and just like have like the audience in the palm of their hands. There was like no script, and there's nothing. It was amazing. And I remember thinking like, oh, I really want to try to do this. Yeah. So I signed up for classes and I started doing it. And then I just realized like improv was just this, it's weird. It's like just this like method of like living, basically, if that makes sense, where you're just like, it just kind of teaches you to be okay with being awkward. That's like all improv is. And then so I was doing that for a while, and I really fell in love with that. And we did a couple different like random improv teams at my high school and like just around Orlando. And then one day, my little brother, who's on the podcast with us, he showed up and he's like, "Hey, I got this game. Do you want to play it?" And I was like, "What is it?" He's like, "Dungeons and Dragons." And I was like, "I never ever want to play that game." that's the nerdiest thing I've ever heard. He's like, no, try it. And I was like, "Okay." We tried it, and ever since then, I have been kind of hooked on it. And that's a good point. It really is this nice mixture of like storytelling and then improv and just like being with a group and just having a really good time. And yes, I think that's a very long-winded way of saying yes. I think that's where it all started.
So I do have a question about the timeline of when Andy came to you and said, "Hey, do you want to play this game?" But before I do that, can I just make a comment? Dude, your voice is so like, I don't know, it's like butter. It's like Southern butter to me. It's like, I don't know.
It's strong.
Yeah.
So they called me in high school, actually, Southern butter.
That's a great nickname.
All right, so let's go back. I
appreciate
want to
that.
just want to get a reference point of when that conversation happened between you and your brother.
Let me think. That was probably right around. So the first time I ever played TTRPG, I think was like 2000 and maybe like 2013. It's like that was the first time I ever played, and then played a little bit here and there, and then I moved to Los Angeles in 2015.
Yeah.
And at that point, because I work in the film industry, I do some screenwriting and then just some random like production stuff. So when I first moved out here, I was driving like camera trucks and like grip trucks just all over LA. So I just had a lot of time in the car to myself because LA traffic is awful. So at that point, I started listening to the Adventure Zone, which is an amazing TTRPG show, which actually I've had this thought. It kind of reminds me of what you guys are doing. It's like a family in like the podcasting TTRPG space, just like talking, doing advice. Yeah, it's really cool. So at that point, 2015, 2016 is when I really started picking TTRPGs back up, because when I first started playing it in like 2013, it was just fun, whatever. And then 2015, 2016, that's when I started getting the idea for the podcast.
So you in 2015, so you had this like early start and it's a bit more fun, and then you kind of come around and you're listening to this podcast and you get an idea. I know you guys ran Storm King's Thunder, or I can't remember the order that those words go in. It can either King, Storm, Thunder, or I don't know. It's some order there. The Wizards of the Coast campaign, and I know you kind of talked about how that was like your prep for you guys stepping into A Far From. I wanted to ask you like an interesting choice of, because a lot of dungeon masters, especially running actual play podcasts and stuff, run things in a homebrew world that is like their own setting and things like that. I know that you run your stuff in, isn't it Faerun in the Forgotten Realms at the moment? But you've got your own campaign that you've written for it, but it's within the Forgotten Realms, right? Well, what led to that choice? Because obviously, you come back into TTRPGs, you're thinking about, you've just finished Storm King Thunder. Is that like, cool, I'm going to write in like a space that I understand? What led to that decision?
It was more like, like what you just said. It's the first time I ever DM'd was when we started doing the show. So when we did Storm Kings, which you got right, by the way, so well done. It was the right order and combination of words. When we did Storm Kings, another member of our show was DMing it. And then once we started actually recording the show, that's when I started DMing. And I think it was more just kind of just have a point of reference for the players of like, oh, like this is this village, this is this city, this is what this race means in this world. Because I think it just to take a little bit of pressure off of me for the moment, just to be like, I don't. Wizards of the Coast and the D&D world have done such a good job of making such a beautiful, like colorful world. At that point, I was like, I don't need to like reinvent the wheel. They've already kind of got it going. But moving forward, I think I'm gonna like do a homebrew setting, because I just think it'd be really fun.
Nice. Yeah. Do you know, I think that's, you know, a space that's quite interesting. I like your point about remaking the wheel, and it's interesting because for me, as someone who like, I think coming into D&D, I saw the Forgotten Realms and was like, oh my god, there's so much lore. I was like, there's just so much to absorb and so much to take in and so much to have to, you know, be able to reference and know about. And I, like, in my head, I play pretty low fantasy in terms of like for my players. I'm not Keith. This is another thing that I find very interesting about Keith's games. I'm super low fantasy, so for me, Keith's game is the like highest fantasy shit that I have ever endured, and it's really, really wild for me as someone who typically is talking about, you know, like spellcasters are rare within you know, communities and, you know, this, that, and the other. But I think I was looking at the Forgotten Realms like, Jesus Christ, that wheel that they've invented is so much for me to try and clamber on and learn that it almost deterred me from doing that. And I ended up doing the homebrew first. But I like the fact that you've come back round and gone, you know, I've now done this. Now I'm going to like go back and create my thing. I think at some point, honestly, I might do the opposite and go test out what they've got and see what's going on there, because I do have Dragon Heist Waterdeep, like the book, and some of the other like campaign books for the Forgotten Realms, and you know, they're really good. The settings are really lush. I love what they've got there, so you know, I really can't massively complain. But I did just want to get my vision out first. I think I was a little bit desperate to get it out.
Yeah, of course. But I think that is actually, it's funny you say that, because that's one of the things that has stressed me out the most about doing a story, like doing an improv, like group storytelling story in a established world, because there'll be times where like Andy, Christian, or Knox will like ask something about like, oh, how many people are in Waterdeep, and I'm like, I don't know, 7. It's like that already exists, so I'm like, oh shit, I have no idea. So if I think moving forward, I think it will be an interesting thing the next time I'm in charge of whatever story, because we don't know. I don't know if I'm just going to keep staying in the DM seat like next season or next chapter or whatever, or if like one of the other people are going to take over. But next time I am in the driver's seat, as it were, I think I'm going to do some sort of like full on homebrew world, because then when I do make up those answers, it's just like whatever. I'll literally always be right, which is the only point of being a DM, is you just always want to be right. So.
So let me ask you. So there's going to be probably a little pattern here. You might notice that Bodhi's going to probably be probably a lot more interested in just the under mechanics and underpinning aspects of D&D, and I'm just a little bit more intrigued by just some of you and some of your behavior. And what I've noticed about you, David, that I think is interesting is just even in the first couple minutes of this podcast, you're very reflective and you're able to take a step back, really add full context and bring it up to, you know, coming around to addressing a point. And there's an element of it that feels very present, like you're listening pretty deeply about things and you're letting those things sort of digest. Is that something that feels like it's been developing over time and you've gotten to a point where you can do that better now? Or does it feel like that's kind of how I operate, I've always operated?
That's, first of all, thank you. That means a lot. That's a very high compliment. But to answer the question, I actually kind of feel like it goes back to improv, because one of the things I love about improv, and one of the things I think makes it so powerful, is most people just see it from a sort of a performance standpoint of like, ooh, this is how to be funny, or this is how to make a funny joke. But like for me, improv is really more just like a way to look at life, because from a certain aspect, like all of us are improvising constantly. Like for the most part, you don't wake up and have a script of like, oh, I'm going to say this to this person today. I'm going to go do this with this person. So like, if you think about it that way, like we're always sort of doing it. And one of the best ways to improvise, and one of the most effective ways to improvise, at least from my standpoint, is like to go into it with like a yes and mindset of like always being present and always just listening to like, oh, like this is what my scene partner is saying, so that's how I have to respond. Because like that's one of the things like they taught us in like early improv is like, if you go into a scene with like a preconceived notion of how that scene's going to go, you're already, wait, can I curse?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool.
You're
Like
already
if you're
fucked.
going, yeah, exactly. You're already fucked. You're literally already fucked. If you go in like, I'm gonna have this conversation be about apples, and then your scene partner's like, so how do you like cars? You're like, oh, apples are great, and then they're just like, what? So like, I feel like once I started learning improv, that was when that sort of mentality started to grow, because it's like, yeah, it's one thing to just like kind of be arrogant and like push your own ideas on people, but like if you're going into everything with like an ideology of like, oh, like I'm going to listen to what this person's saying, I'm going to be here with this person, I'm going to do my best to make them look good, no matter what happens, you're always at least going to have fun, or the conversations or your scenes or whatever happens in life, it's going to be more or less successful. So I think that answered your question. Sorry, again, that was kind of roundabout. I ramble a lot.
Hey, don't. I want to come back to some of your styling, because talk about some of our UO game a little bit. But what I want to talk about with the improv, because Tom did acting stuff when he lived in LA, as
nice,
doing similar stuff to you, except going down the acting route in LA when he was young and douchier, may I say?
No, you're such a nice guy.
And you know, I also studied acting at college for 2 years, and again, I did improv. I had an improv class every Friday, and it was my favorite class by like a long stretch, because it allowed my freedom and my creativity to roll. Also, I'm not a Shakespearean actor. I'm not very Brechtian either. I'm definitely fit into more Stanislavski, a bit more like emotional memory, and you know, pulling on like method acting more for me is where I kind of get most of my stuff from. And I think for me, the improv really allowed me to hone that and grow it in a way. And I think one of the big things that's been consistent from what I was taught in that class, where you were taught when we spoke to Mark Garkusha, DM of the Cast I podcast.
Love that gentleman. He is Cast I is amazing. Yeah, indeed.
And also Amir, thank you so much. From Dimples and Dice. All of us basically have agreed that a big part of it is, like you said, and it's been described to different people in different ways. I was taught it is do not block the person who you're with.
Exactly.
So
yeah,
they say something and you're like, yes, they're like, oh, why would you do that to me? And you're like, because you stepped on my foot and that fucking hurt, you know, kind of thing. And you roll with it and you let that go. And then I think the other big thing was, the say yes and, or like as Mark puts it, find a reason to say yes, or as I'm putting it, don't block people, you know, that. And then also the almost like, what's the term I'm looking for? Like basically the way that you look at it that we're trying to grow this scene together, we're trying to nurture it together, and we're not trying to in any way inhibit it. It becomes this space of like pure natural back and forth. And like you said, this like flow and this like love between you, where if, like you said, someone comes in with a preconceived notion, it ends up really suffering. And I think the big way, and you said this a second ago, to really make sure that you don't do that is by going in and trying to make your partner look like the star of the moment. Yeah. And what's interesting is when you get two people who are doing that to each other, you have a crazy scene. The scene ends up being amazing and flourishing, and both people really like setting each other up for beautiful moments. And it ends up being really beautiful. And that's what I really think, you know, when you watch really big professional D&D podcasts, you know, talking about like the apex predators, the roles, the dimensions, the, you know, you know, the high roller, you know, all those people, they have this level of understanding of that. And it means that when it does come to the role play, even though they're playing their character to the truest form, they're also going, you know, at the end of the day, every D&D group would break up if everyone played their character realistically. Like in our UO game, I would have been like, "Fuck this shit! I'm not going on a crazy adventure. I'm way too scared for this crap." Like I'm not about that. And it's one of those things where you find a reason to say yes. And I think actually in our UO game, Tom and Jess did a really good job of being resistant to that at the beginning, and then finding reasons to come around and for their own personal character growth. And I think it's one of those things that really does, you know, elevate you as a performer if you can do. But I just wanted to agree with you on improv really feels like a style of acting that is just truth. It's like you said, it's the closest form to life without like, it's not that you can't do a script really well. You know, we see amazing actors all the time, but it comes down to, if you are improvising, it ends up getting this modicum of honesty from you that you're not expecting to put into it. Like I was doing a monologue the other day as a female vigilante in our world, and for her this rebellious political movement really means a lot to her. So she's describing a holiday that is centered around this rebellion. They basically march uptown, and there's like a raising of fists, and like a lot of like everyone starts dancing and like screaming in the streets in protest. And while I was doing it, I just started like crying. I was like, and like to the character, it meant so much. And to me, like, I was like, this means like mountains. And it ended up just pulling that emotion out of me, and I couldn't even control it. And I was like, that's what I love about improv. That like truth that you almost can't stop. It almost comes out because you're forced to bring it out. Not much of a question in there, but
I agree with that.
Just cool.
It's if you can like, I don't want to say lower yourself. If you can lower those barriers around yourself in those moments with those characters, you just can get get to some like honesty, like you said, and get to some truth, and it's beautiful. I think if everyone can get to a moment like that in these TTRPGs and in these stories we play, I think that'll be the moment that they're like, okay, yeah, I love this. Like I want to do this forever and always, because it's like weirdly cathartic. You can deal with stuff. You can like stuff that's been bothering you in your real life. You can like kind of put it on your character and be like, oh, like how would you deal with this situation? Kind of have a little safe space to like experiment with some thoughts and feelings you might not necessarily be comfortable with showing in real life. So I think that's I love it. I love what you said. Full support.
Yeah, and I would even build on it to build on what you were saying, David, which is when we discover that moment, it's amazing. It can be transformative for our experience within a TTRPG, but it's also, and I'm going to be general right now because not for everyone, but for a lot of us, we seek out that moment. We are hopeful to have that moment happen
in life.
In life, but you know, and also we sit at the table, hoping that magical like interaction happens, or that magical like idea gets, and everyone can kind of know when it's happening. It's a real time acknowledgement of, oh shit, this is happening right now. Like there's some really good shit happening. Like if these dice roll a certain way, this could fuck some shit up, or this could make some shit like it could, you know. It's a really cool like energy that happens in those moments.
I totally agree. I used to play in the Adventure League, which for a moment I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna be great. Like playing D&D every week with like a whole bunch of people, this is going to be so cool. And I started doing it, and I quickly realized that like, don't get me wrong, I love Adventure League. If you want to play it. That's your choice. But like, because of the way it's set up, they sort of have to take all those moments out, and it's like just the dice rolling. And it was interesting to see that other side of TTRPGs, when it's just like, here's just the mechanics. Like if you try to role play, if you try to have some of these like emotional moments, these like life-changing moments, like we don't have time for that. We have 55 people at this table. Like, just roll your damn dice. Did you hit? No, cool. Moving on. So it's an interesting like flop, because I know a lot of people, at least in the space that like we all sort of exist. It seems like everyone really likes to focus on and talk about like the role play aspect of it, which is like one of my favorite aspects of it too. But it's interesting because like this is why I brought this up. There's nothing as frustrating, but also as, like, potentially as funny, or as like, if you're having one of these emotional moments of like, oh yeah, my character, here's growth, here's all these backstory, lore drops, whatever, I'm gonna roll for oh damn it, it's a 1, shit. What do I do? But like, I think that it just adds such a unique element to the game, where like you can be having all these really cool moments, and then the dice can be like, no, not today, fool. And then you have to learn how to like incorporate those moments into the story, or you have to realize how to move past that and still have that like awesome anime moment as a character. Like, I think that's, I don't know, it's just it's a really fun system, and I enjoy it quite a bit.
I think, do you know, I really agree with that, because, and I would say, for example, for me, like, if we talk about, just take like, for example, Brennan Lee Mulligan and Matt Mercer, if we take them as examples. Matt is very serious and finds a lot of his beat and rhythm in seriousness, and like we talked about, those moments that are big character development moments, and often relies on, you know, the dice telling that, being that good and that coming off in that way. But I think one thing that I love about Brennan Lee Mulligan and his style, and that I've tried to really pick up from him, is, like you said, those moments where there's this big buildup and then something goes wrong. There's some sort of like dice roll that goes wrong, or even just a decision in his mind that allows for him to take this serious moment and turn it into pure silliness and pure like comedy in just the flick of a second. And don't get me wrong, it's not everyone's style. It's something I really, really appreciate. But I think, like you said, in terms of dynamically changing those like high energy, high emotion moments into then something that really reflects what the dice actually did. Do you know what I mean? I think for me is something I really, really value and really, really, I guess, like enjoyed about Brennan Lee Mulligan's style when I first invested some time in watching his style of DMing and learning a bit from him. But yeah, it's one of those ones that is very, very odd. I wanted to like ask you, based on like all of this, when you're going into like improv and stuff with your brother, friends are one thing, you know, and strangers are another thing. How is it doing it with your brother, where you guys are being vulnerable? And I obviously family, you know, you're in some families are really open with each other. Like our family, I don't think we've had a secret from each other in like 10, 15 years at this point. And so, that's awesome. You know, we, you know, I think some families are like that. And then other families I know are like, oh, like my dad doesn't know that I'm gay, that I have this job, that I live in this country, that I do this, you know, like, so it's entirely, how is that for you guys? Do you find that vulnerability is able to break through when you role play, or was it already kind of there when you went into it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Real quick, I just want to say, I love you guys. You guys are amazing. I think like the whole like father son, like everything you just said, I love it. Like, when you came onto the UO game, I was like, who are these two guys? This is wild. And then like seeing you guys interact with each other and just like how connected you both are is super inspiring. And I mean I have a father, and it's just, I don't know, there's just something about the father-son relationship. It's like super into it. But yeah, you guys are amazing.
Quickly to touch on that, just so you know, we haven't always been like this as well. Like me and Tom, actually, I was very close with my mother till I was about 16, 17. And then Tom started meditating and basically like started looking at himself a little bit. And through him doing that, I kind of began a journey of self-reflection myself in a different method. And eventually we found each other as like father and son again. But there was years where I called Tom, and then at some point he was my basketball coach, and I called him coach for like 2 years. I literally called, like, around the house, I'd be like, yo, coach, can you pass me the water? Like, fucking.
And you so come tuck me in, coach.
It was a different relationship. And so, but it's one that has taken time to formulate. But I really appreciate that. It's something that we've put a lot of effort into to get to the point where we're at now.
There's been a huge
arc, character arc, story arc for both of us, you know, to get to where we are.
And I think in the end, and we'll circle back to this in a second, but
Yeah.
for us, you start looking at just all the stuff in your life, and career is one thing, and friends and family, and you start trying to put priorities on things. And for us, this is a big priority. Like
That's awesome.
in the end, we try we try not to think about these things, but nothing is promised. Nothing is promised. So just capture the most important things.
Fucking death is everywhere.
Everywhere.
But like,
Especially-
for real. So like, capture it and grab it and hold it and like store it away every single time. Keep doing it and doing it and doing it. Do it. Don't ever get tired of doing that shit. Yeah. Bank that shit.
Absolutely.
So anyway.
Back to you.
It's super inspirational what you guys are doing. I every time we play with Keith, I'm just like, man, this is so cool. Like I love seeing it. Yeah, of course. And sorry, just to kind of keep gassing you guys up a little bit, like the episodes of your show that I've listened to, which I love, by the way. You guys, your energy is so much fun, and you can just tell that connection you guys have, and it's super, super inspirational. Love it.
Thank you.
Of course. So you asked a question about Andy.
Andy, vulnerability, improv with Andy.
Yeah. It's weird because we also have, me and Andy, so I have two brothers, and I'm very close with both of them, and honestly our whole family is very close. But my older brother Matthew, he traveled overseas a lot when we were growing up. Like he lived in Spain for a year, then Argentina for 2 years, and then was like in Morocco or Monaco, I forget exactly. He was somewhere, he's been all over the place. So there was a couple year period where it was just me and Andy at the house, and we got really close, and that's when a lot of our similarities started to, or our not similarities, our like common hobbies and just common things that we like doing kind of really like came to the forefront. We both really like video games, we like storytelling, we like hanging out with friends and all that other stuff. So with those couple years of really it being just me and Andy, because my family also moved around a lot growing up, we did get really close. So doing improv with Andy really feels quite natural because we've done it quite a bit, and then also we've been on a lot of the same teams, and we went to Andy went to SAC too, out in Orlando, and we both learned that around the same time, and we've performed a lot with each other, and it's something that I value almost more than the show itself, actually, is the relationship I have with Andy, as well as Christian, and now because we just got a new cast member, Knox, and we've only known her for a couple about 2 years now, but like even that relationship is, to me, the show is second. The relationships and like the memories we make and the moments we all improvise together are really what is worth it, because it is hard at times. But one thing I like about doing virtual TTRPGs is if it ever gets hard, I just look away from the screen, and then I'm in a room by myself, so I can do whatever silly voice or whatever wild scene I need to. But no, there's really never been like a tough or like a challenging point when it's come to like being vulnerable or improvising with this group, and that is one of the reasons I actually we started. That's one of the reasons we started the show, was because when I moved to LA and when I was listening to the Adventure Zone and when I was starting to get more into like the idea of D&D podcasts, it was just a really new like time in my life. It was the first time I like really moved out on my own. It was the first time I was like trying to like get my career going, and the first time I was like, oh, so this is what it means to be an adult. And just as a way to like stay in touch with Andy, that's kind of what I wanted to start the podcast for, and it's turned into this like connection point that we have now, and it's such a huge part of our lives that like it's, I don't know, I feel like I'm drifting off topic a little bit, but
No, you're not.
No, not at all.
No, I think we're actually in that space.
I think we're about to
Yeah.
hit. I think we're about to hit the point.
I think we're right there.
You're about
We're
to.
right there,
You're
yeah.
about to hit the moment.
But yeah, no, I think just that. I think, at least for me, the idea of it being difficult or challenging to be vulnerable with my little brother in the TTRPGs, I think it's always a little bit difficult, because I don't think there's any sort of in acting and in storytelling, you always have to be vulnerable, and it's never easy.
Yeah.
But if you're able to get through those slightly awkward, slightly tough moments, I think if both parties are willing to be vulnerable, you can get to some like genuine magic. And I think that's the thing I value most about doing this with Andy and Christian and Knox, is we've been vulnerable with each other in the past, so it's easy to be vulnerable moving forward. And now I feel like the stories we're telling are less just like slapstick goofy, which I love. And that's like, speaking of styles, that's one of my styles, just being just like a goober. But now like kind of like what you're saying with like Brendan Lee Mulligan, like those like transitions are like deeper, because there's been so much vulnerability. It's like we can tell fart jokes, and we can talk about, I'm gonna kill this guard with my spear by sticking it up his butt, and then all of a sudden switch over into like, but this is why I really left home, to like find myself and to find my parents, like all this other stuff. So I think it is difficult, but because it's difficult, it makes it valuable, I think.
Let me ask you this, because I think a big part of what you're saying, and from what I hear, is like there's an element of trust. There's with vulnerability, there's an element of trust, and there's something where, you know, like you mentioned, you know, you've only known this newer girl for 2 years or so, but there's still, like you said, it still feels new in the TTRPG space, and that improvising space, and that like energy zone, you know, still feels new. I wanted to ask you, if anything, did your years of climbing in gyms teach you like to build your trust and to grow that kind of trust barrier with people? Like, because obviously when you're belaying with people and whatnot, and you need to be able to communicate correctly, also if someone's spotting you when you're bouldering and whatnot, like did that build that trust for you, and that like resilience and that ability to trust, in some cases, a random stranger?
That was masterfully done.
Thank you.
Yes, it did. Because I mean, you hit it on the head. Like, you can't be like doing top rope stuff with like by yourself. So you have to be able to communicate and like, hey, I can't reach this next hold, or like, I'm super scared right now. Like, what do I do? It's I mean I think definitely it helped a little bit. It also, just rock climbing is very, very fun.
I mean, and as far as exercises go, I did rock climbing in high school for many years, and I've never come away feeling muscles that I'd never felt before in my life, like back muscles, forearms, finger muscles, that I'd be like, oh my god, my pinkies hurt, like my pinky fingers hurt. I'm like, I don't even know, I've never done anything with these, but they hurt somehow.
That was every time I like don't climb and then I start climbing again, I'm just like, wow, there's so many muscles that hurt right now. That's also just because I'm very out of shape, but
I mean, dude, the TTRPG community at the end of the day could probably do at this point, with the lockdowns and the pandemic, we'd all do with a good Zumba class together. I think
we should do it. Get to the way these adventurers actually look in our heads. But yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think that especially when it comes to like, it's one thing to do a TTRPG or a role-playing game like off air. Like, I think it's still a beautiful, wonderful thing, but like kind of like what you guys are doing, like having the performance aspect of it, or like the deliverable aspect of it, like you definitely need that trust. And like, it's really cool to like watch what you guys are doing, because like this is like a very well-oiled machine. Like the questions are handing back and forth to each other, and it's just I've felt very safe and cared for this entire time. So like it's I think anytime we're putting a product or putting content out for people, like you got to do it with people that you absolutely trust, because if not, you're gonna crash and burn. It's just like, okay, well, this is just a waste of my time. Now I guess I have a couple episodes of a podcast that I'm never going to listen to again. But no, it's cool. It's a very important aspect in my life, and especially in this space.
Do you know what? You're literally the first person who's like called us out on like us doing our thing. It's so interesting, and it's something Tom and I talk about a lot, because for us, we learned. So we actually did a podcast. I think it's nearly 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
wow.
we did a podcast together with a friend of ours, and we released 3 episodes. And the feedback we got from the first episode was, please God, never do this again. and then like the next couple were literally people just being like, this is awful. Like, please stop what you're doing. Never quit your jobs. And it was like really brutal. And I think then when we decided to do this and come back around and start doing this, we realized that, like with anything, and it's interesting because Tom and I both come from heavy sports backgrounds. I played every sport as a child I physically could get my hands on. Tom was my coach basketball for many years, played lots of sports, and you know, we've done martial arts and everything. We've covered as many sports as we can. So when it comes to solving things and learning things, both of us come at it sometimes from a sporting perspective. So when it comes to like acting and, you know, doing this podcast and stuff, we see it as like practice. Cool, we've got to put in the hours. We see it as like, cool, we have to learn. And we, after every podcast we do, we assess each other. We kind of talk about what we thought we did good, what we did better. Like we talk about it after our live streams. When we do our sessions with you guys, we have a debrief the next day and talk about what we did good, what we could do better. Like, and it's something that we very much put into a lot of aspects of our lives. But with the podcast specifically, like we learned early on, like before we would talk over each other, and we used to do it separately. We realized doing it separately doesn't work as good. We needed to do it together. Now that we're in the same room, it works a lot better. But we're talking over each other. We weren't blending our questions well. Now we actually, and I'll give this up for the camera, why not? We actually have a system at which we communicate to each other behind like the computer and down here. We have a system how we communicate. So if I want to ask a question or follow up, I go like this. If Tom wants to do it, he goes like that. If I want Tom to ask a question, I point at him. If he wants me to ask a question, he points at me. If we think it's time to wrap up, we start being like, cool, this one last question, or like me last question, you know, kind of thing. And we just basically do hand signals to each other back here so that we aren't bumping into each other when we do it.
And it's been such a learning process. And I would say also the three-person dynamic is different than the two-person dynamic.
Oh,
so we're,
absolutely,
yeah. So we're sort of dividing our airspace with you, or trying to do that, trying to juggle it so it feels kind of balanced, but doing it in a way that doesn't feel so orchestrated, but also feels organic and feels conversational. It is a little bit tricky, and it's been a learning process for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those weird ones. So oiled but practiced.
As the best well-oiled machines are, very, very practiced, I would say, because it's just cool. It shows. It's the expertise and the experience shows from someone who's sitting on this side of the same conversation. It feels very organic and very.
Thanks, man. We talk about how prepared we are. We're just plugging in some power right now into our laptop as it goes dark.
Oh, dude, no worries at all. That's the entire reason we did Storm Kings. We had a year. We recorded our podcast for a year before we even started recording our podcast, and even with that, there's still times I'll be like 15 minutes into an episode, and then Andy's like, shit, not recording. I'm like, God damn it.
Dude, we've done that. We've done it so many times. It's one of those things, and tech is the most unreliable thing as well. Like we literally today plugged in I did a Zoom call like this last night for our D&D game, where I had some people playing online and some people in person, and I streamed like a part of the screen on a TV for the players there, and then screen shared that to the players online. Everything worked fine. I plug in same camera system, no less than literally 7-8 hours later, and it goes, nope, no, not working anymore.
Not today.
So leading up to this, I was fiddling with the camera, like, what the fuck has happened? I was like, I've not even touched anything. This is crazy.
Dude, oh no, it's the word. That blending virtual and tech and stuff with acting and TTRPG stuff, it's such an interesting thing, because like you said, there's been multiple times we've been on stream, we've been recording, or like whatever, like nothing's been touched, nothing's been changed, like midstream it'll be like all of a sudden it's like my computer's like, I don't know what a microphone is, I've never seen one of these before. Like I lost that, I don't know where it is. It's like why do you do this to me? But I feel you.
So yeah, no, that's I mean, there is that aspect of technology as well, that is when we're all making personal choices with technology. We use Zoom for some things, we use some other aspects for our live streams, but also I would say it's the same thing with with DMs. They have their own personal styles, and we talked about it with Keith and you guys as well. What we noticed about your style that was interesting, and I think it's very similar to yours, Bodhi, is music is and I'm not sure if it's driven by you, David, or not, but music seems like it's a very thematically important thing in your campaign. Can you talk about how music plays that role?
Also, where'd you get your music? Because just from one DM to another, hook me up. Where are you getting your music from?
Of course.
Spotify playlist. Link me that shit.
I'll send it over. We most of where I get my music from is from this place called artlist.io. Okay. It's because it was funny. It's just a royalty free like film, like whatever it's called, music library, music source. And yeah, that's where I get most of it, because that's just what I was using at the editing job I was at when I started editing From Afar. I was like, I'll just use this thing. But yeah, no, music, I think that also kind of goes just back to like storytelling and like the filmmaking, because like I'm a filmmaker, like first and foremost, and like it's like a lot of times in the show I'll be talking about things and I'll be describing it like camera movements, like, oh, the camera moves over here, or this, and I found that helps players a lot, because like most people have watched movies and they sort of know the basic terminology of like, oh, the camera pans this way, you tilt this way, the zoom in, zoom out, and I feel like that really helps a lot with like theater of the mind stuff. But with music, to me, it is one of the most important aspects of a film. Like you can see like whatever movie without music, and it can be the most emotional scene, it can be the most pivotal scene in the movie, and then you take the music out and you're like, this is so goofy, like this sounds so strange. And then but if you have the right music and the right tone, like when you're watching, you don't even hear the music, you just like are feeling these emotions and you're feeling these things. So I think with when it comes to D&D, and especially like I was saying before, with this like edited, polished like podcast version of it, it's one thing to have music at like the live table. Like that's one of the things I enjoy most about like DMing live stuff, is like finding, oh, all right, what's the vibe right now, like on the fly, like adding stuff to the playlist or moving stuff around in the playlist. But like when you're editing a show, when you're editing a D&D session, you get a chance to really sit down and think about like, okay, cool, I've edited this scene, I've cut out all the extra words, I've cut out everything, and now like what's the vibe here, what are we going for? And I think it just adds, if you do it successfully, you can just add so much to the audio. Well, this is another thing, it's weird, because like when you're live when you're like live at the table DMing, your audience are the people who are also participating in the story. But then when you have a podcast or a live stream, your audience are people who are just watching. So like I feel like having that differentiation is valid to keep in mind, because like I said, it's a joy of mine to be at the table, just like, oh cool, like this battle music is too intense, we got to dial it back. Oh, now it's too like kind of like constantly tweaking that, and it's a fun aspect. But in the edited version of the show, you get that extra point to just sit down and be like, okay, cool, what are we trying to say here? What are the emotions we're trying to get across here? So I think it's like really important, and I think it just heightens and kind of takes your scenes and your story to the next level if you can do it, or if you can do it appropriately.
I fully agree with you. It's like listening to myself talk about music and movies. That was so funny. that was really weird. I've literally, I think, said that to so many of my friends so many times. That's so weird. I fully agree with you. Like, more than anything, like music to me, I literally spoke about this the other day with my grandma. I was like, if someone asked me if I could be blind or deaf, I would choose blind every time, because I can't live without music. I literally just can't live without music. I would be fine. Like, I don't have to see shit, but I definitely cannot live without hearing like Jimi Hendrix guitar licks. Like, are you joking me? Like, I need that stuff in my life. So I think I really appreciate what you do with music. And something else, talking about your style, I'll talk about a little bit more about that in a second, some stuff that I really like. But I think the music aspect is so big, and the stuff that you choose in your editing is so strong and powerful that it really does elevate it. What I wanted to ask you as well about that is, like, for me, something that I've begun doing is I said, oh, heck to copyright stuff, because I just don't have the time to fucking be sat spending hours trying to find music for a D&D session in preparation, when I've also got a session to write maps to find tokens to make. Like, I don't have fucking time for that shit. But what I've started doing now is using a lot of what I would call like modern music for fantasy stuff. So for combat, I'll play like a lot of like 90s hip hop, you know, like some Wu-Tang and stuff like that. And then have, you know, for like chase scenes, I play like a lot of EDM and like, you know, like drum and bass stuff to keep it like, and I try and like mix it up and use different types of music, as opposed to just like your typical like loot and stuff. Because I personally find it's hard to, for me, I struggle to find the music that suits my moments in that style. And if that, literally the websites I've used, I've struggled with. I wanted to ask you, what type of keywords are you like putting into your search thing when you're like how refined are you going in your search thing? Are you like emotional, acoustic guitar, crying, like Western, exactly.
Western with a trombone.
Like, how keywordy are you getting when you're finding your music? And how long does it take you typically to find a song for a scene? That's another question I'm interested in.
That is actually a cool question. So full disclosure here. I haven't not recently. When we started doing the show, I was doing every aspect of the editing. I was editing. Yeah. So now we've divided it up, and Christian does all the sound design and music work. So I would just to full disclosure, and he is doing a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
He does excellent. So I haven't done it in a while for the show, but when I was doing it, it took a while, honestly, because there was the websites we were using until we got Artlist didn't have that great of search options. It'd be like I'd be like, cool, I need emotional music that has this sort of undertone and this sort of genre and this sort of instrument, and then I would get something like sound like an 8-bit Mario Kart theme song. I'm like, this is nothing what I was going for.
Getting some Ben Howard or something. You're like, oh, damn it, this is not even close to what I was wanting.
This is cool music, but just not for this moment I'm looking for. It used to take a really long time, and mostly what we search for is like based off of like genre and like and like mood, and because the site we use now has like a really advanced you can have length, and you can have mood and genre and instruments and all sorts of other stuff. So but I think the thing that's been more helpful is we've just been, over the last 2 years now, because we've been doing this for a little over 2 years, we've just been building like a catalog of all the music we have. So like now all our music on the website, it has all the keywords to it, but all our music on our files is all divided up by like, oh, this one kind of has this vibe to it. It sort of sounds like Asian, or this one sort of has like a super marching band feel to it, or this one's good like fight music that turns into kind of an emotional music. So we reuse a lot of our music, and it just like, because we just know it, and it's weird. Every once in a while I'll hear, because the site we use is not like exclusive to us, every once in a while I'll be like watching TV or like watching whatever, and I'll hear one of our songs come on. I'm just like, whoa, that's super strange. But you said something a while ago that I resonated with. You use a lot of modern music for like hip hop and whatever. I use a lot of like movie soundtracks, and like video game soundtracks. That's like one of my main things. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of just like, yes, the loot track. Here we go. But like, I can be like, oh wow, I've seen Harry Potter, and like I know in this scene, this song was huge. And that's kind of a similar vibe I'm going for. So I'll like find that song and like lay it over what in my live games or whatever, because we can't use John Williams music in my podcast, unfortunately. I would love to, but we can't.
We need an open royalties license, dude. We're elevating your music, John Williams. You don't understand.
Come on, man. This is what you thought of what it was. This is what we're gonna make it.
Exactly. Do you know what? I it's surprising to me actually hearing you talk how freaking similar our styles are, like legitimately. Like
I was just gonna say that.
That is exactly how I operate. Like for me, movie soundtracks are like so huge to me as well. Like that's especially if you go through. I mean, I can't. Soundtracks is a conversation where I could literally go for hours. I mean, there's so many movies that have changed my life soundtrack wise. It's unbelievable.
I mean, we've not talked in this direction, but as far as playing style, as two players, I think you guys have a lot of similarities, as well as how you interact, how you try to find moments where you can bring others in. So my experience is watching you two, I'm not hugely surprised that there is some commonality in another way, because I've definitely seen it with both of you as players, and how you're interacting in the game we're playing, for sure.
That's interesting. I
would agree.
One thing I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned it, and I wanted to talk to you even during this podcast. Something that I love that you do in our game, where we play in the UO game, and during this podcast, and something on your podcast is your pacing is freaking exceptional. You're up there, in my opinion, with people like Abria Iyengar in terms of pacing. Like, she hits pacing in a way that I really don't see many other DMs doing, and adding dynamics to her and not even just like emotional dynamics. I mean, literal like vocal pace of like delivering information so that it has impact and punch and stuff. And I think you do it in a very similar way.
Thank you.
How you do that.
Also with space.
Yeah,
you
that's
allow
what I mean.
Space to actually have a voice, which is really important, and I've seen it as well.
It's almost like as well. There's moments in, like, for example, a moment that I really love. One of our favorite moments in film ever is at the end of Kill Bill 1, also in Kill Bill 2, when Bud and Bill are sat at the trailer talking about, she just got through the crazy 88s. And she's like, she's doing it with a Hanzo sword? And where'd she get a fucking Hanzo sword? And he's like, you hocked your Hanzo sword? There's this beautiful moment where, Bud says that line. He's like, that lady deserves her revenge. We deserve to die. But in between the line, he has this pause where he swallows and thinks and it's just a second, and it changes the line in a way that means that it's like powerful. It comes with heaviness. It comes with him going from joking and being a bit of a douchebag to then knowing that he's being fucking real serious about this. And then instantly he switches back when he goes, but so does she. So we'll just have to see, and you're like, and it's really beautifully delivered. And I think you do that really well. I wanted to ask, when you are DMing, how much is that something you're thinking about and is important to you while you're doing that?
Well, first of all, thank you. That Tarantino and Kill Bill are some of my favorites of all time. So that warms my heart to be compared. So I would say subconsciously that's like all there is, honestly. consciously, whenever I'm DMing, I'm more just like terrified, just like, whoa, oh, I gotta keep this voice up. I gotta do this. Oh, is this next thing gonna hit right? But that's like storytelling and that level of like passion that like Tarantino has in though, because it happens all the time in his movies, like those little moments of just like you said, it just shifts, like a look, a breath, a pause, an inflection changes an entire moment. Like I feel like that is what story is like all about. And as storytellers, I think that's something that we all, like, at some level we all understand that, because I don't think you can be in this realm, in this space, without being a storyteller. And I don't think you can be a storyteller without having some sort of like natural grasp on that, because you can tell a joke, you can tell you can recount an event, whatever, but like when you're like really telling a story, when like you're really into it and you're really passionate about it, like you're not thinking about like, all right, cool, and I need to transition my emotional state from happy to being serious, but I need to do that while remembering this old thing from my past. Like, you know, like all the things they teach you in like acting school and like how to get to those places, you don't think about that when you're just like in the zone telling a story. And and I think that like that's what it's all about. And I think that's what makes some actors great, is they know how to tap into that and like transition those moments. But I think just like from my standpoint, like I said, I'm mostly just more terrified about what if I'm remembering the AC of these goblins. Yeah, but that's a really interesting question, and I think I'm just sort of rambling to sort of try to wrap my mind around an answer for that. But that's a really cool question.
Thank you.
You know,
I'm
in your
gonna
rambling,
keep
though,
thinking
you've
on that.
you've had some really poignant pauses that have been really powerful along the way.
Here's the thing. Again, it's so funny. I think every DM as well. This is hilarious because I'm watching Critical Role season 3 at the moment, and I'm watching Matt in their like first or second like big combat, and he forgets that someone's got blessed, and he forgets that they need to be rolling constitution checks when they get hit with damage, and I'm just like, you know, at the end of the day, every dungeon master is sat there just shitting themselves trying to remember 30 fucking thousand different things going on in that. Like, this person has this spell effect and that spell effect's going on over there, and you're concentrating on this. And then it's like, cool, now it's my turn. And as the DM, I don't want to be the asshole that's going to take 5 minutes in combat to decide between the 6 spells that my bad guy has to do and his 3 abilities. So fuck it, I'm just going to ramble. It becomes this whole thing where, and actually, I think the big thing that as a DM that has assisted me is I have a note. I have 3 notes I have one on my DM screen, one on my computer, and one on my desk in front of me. And all of them say, slow the fuck down. Just says, chill the fuck out, like relax, slow down, think about it. And if anything, it says to me, take a pause. Your players are okay with you breathing for a second, thinking, and moving forward. They're not going to hate you for stalling for a quick second. And that's, I think,
so true.
That was one of the biggest things. And you know what? I still fuck it up. Yesterday, there was like 2 moves. I was using a couple of characters, and we were in this huge combat because I basically ran this the session where the three of the big three of the BBEGs in our world come together for this one-day event where a dog race happens, and they bet large land masses with each other. That's basically cool. And so the players are there, and one of them gets accused of cheating, and like, yes, I'm cheating and I have this powerful gem, fuck you all, basically. And then everything just kicked off. Basically everyone started fighting each other. And so at one point I think I had 20 pieces on the map, and I was like, for me to use the big characters that actually have abilities here, like on their turn, is ridiculous. So until you guys pick off some of the minions, I'm gonna just have the big guys do like little basic things, like just keep you guys, you know, keep them on the map kind of thing. And it's one of those weird things, like you said, there's just so much going on as a DM to think about pacing in the moment. It's just one of those things where, and something that as a skateboarder has taken me ages to learn. For example, to do a kick flip, you need to pop the board, you need to flick your foot off the board, and the last bit of it is you need to get your ankle and flick like that with the ankle.
Yeah.
For years as a young kid, I've been going, cool, you pop, flick, do. Why isn't it working?
Yeah.
Why isn't it working? Eventually, what you learn is if you do it enough times and you get the jump in there and you begin to get the rhythm, you actually don't think pop, slide, flick. You just think kick flip, and your body does it. And you're like, boom. And you're like, wow, that's really weird. It's the same thing with D&D. I think that like pauses in those like moments come when you're like, cool, I'm role playing. I'm in it now. I'm not thinking about anything. And there's that moment because I'm doing it without even thinking at this moment. Like you said, I'm not even thinking about it. And that's when that like real truth kind of comes out. But
I agree.
I really, really agree with that. Something I also really love that you said you do, and it's something I do as well. I actually do cut scenes without my players in them. I do cut scenes to like my bad guys doing stuff without the players there. I'm like, and I love the movie aspect, how you're like the camera pans, like it zooms and like, you know, I try and do that stuff as well. It's so funny. I do exactly that.
It's wild because I used to when we first started, people would like not necessarily get mad at me, but like they would be like, that's not D&D. Like, what are you talking about? They're like, you can't have a cutaway. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like your players, they don't know that. Why are you having like a cutaway? I'm like, well, the characters might not know that, but like the amount of just like, the world's happening. Like that's one of the things that I think is so cool about D&D. And one of the things I think like players pick up on is like, you come to a village, do whatever, blah, 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 leave it, come back. And then if you're able to be like, oh, and there's still this axe mark like on the wall, and like this little kid that you offended is now like a huge bully. Like there's like, if you can like add that, I think people love that. But I think like something I realized that I like doing with like cutaways is even if the characters don't hear or don't see the cutscene of like the BBEG like brewing the ultimate potion or whatever, like the amount of hype that your players get when they see that, like Blackston, the white wizard, might not see this, but like Andy was like, oh shit, this guy, he's, and so it's just like it just gets like the investment more there, I feel like, and I love that.
I agree.
I feel like we just need to play more together, because I think we are just the same. We are the same with everything we're talking about.
I'm seeing not only a strong friendship forming, but a career playing together definitely formulating as well.
Let's freaking do it. Well, I will say, like, I have had the honor of being a part of multiple games and streams and whatever over the last couple of years, but like, no joke, like the level that you two specifically, and everyone in Keith's game is doing amazing, but like the commitment that you two jumped into your characters, even like from the first session, which is hard. It's hard to jump in and like be that character driven and that intentional. But like you two, because I think we had the first, like our first thing in that game was all three of us. We were like at the bar throwing knives and stuff. And like, I remember just being like, holy shit, these two guys mean business. Like I gotta keep up here. Cause like you guys, like, it was like, there was no questions. Like, you're like, boom, this is it. This is what my character's doing. This is the choice I'm making for him. This is like, here's some backstory. Here's some intrigue. I was like, whoo, it was very good.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Perspectives are everything, right?
That's so funny. Yeah. I was just thinking that. That's
saying like father, like son.
Dude, my perspective was, I'm the rookie in the room, and I just need to hang on by my fucking fingernails. And immediately I was like, holy shit! Like, it was like, to circle back, it was your pacing, it was your voice, it was your.
We stepped away and we were like, Jess and David are insane. We were like, oh my God, Jess's commitment and like just being legitimately an asshole and like just great. I was just like, holy fuck, Jess is so like, when they talked about like, oh, I want to like mostly first person roleplay, I was like, wow, Jess is. And then when you started doing your thing, we were also like, fucking David is insane. We were like, this is crazy. But I think the thing that Tom and I really came into that game with our mentality was, look, we appreciate that Keith wants playtesting, so he wants us to come in and give it our all. And I think something that Tom and I have been really doing, we watch a lot of the professional streams out there. We watch a lot of the professional players, and you know, we look up to people like Travis Willingham, you know, Lou Wilson, you know, what's her name, Ishii, like there's Erica, a bunch Ishii, of amazing, incredible voice actors who play characters in ways that are like absolutely incredible, and the way they interact with people. And I think Tom and I, again, are just constantly going, how can we be the best of that, and how can we do the best of that? And I think, like, for example, the voice I chose is my strongest accent. My Russian accent is by far my strongest. So I was like, I'm going to go with that. It's something that I know I can do consistent throughout the whole way through all of this. I know that I'm not going to fuck it up. And furthermore, like, I think a big part of that, and something that I think we both decided early on, was we were like, we need to have a flaw that is like a big thing that we can play on from the start. We were like, we need to know what both of us is wrong, like what's wrong with us, as well as why are we also about to be the heroes of this world, like what is also fucking wrong with us. And I think we had that conversation when we were building our characters together. We were like, I almost said almost instantly, I was like, oh, I'm gonna be a Titan Slayer who's a pussy. I was like, that's fucking hilarious. That's so funny. Amazing. I was like, that's too funny for me, you know. And you were like, fuck it, I'll be a fighter, a halfling. I'll be tiny and I'll be fucking like a badass fighter. And we were like, cool. The dichotomies of that allowed us to grow that really nicely. But first of all, I really appreciate you saying that in terms of our, because it lets us know that we really are doing it right. And we hope to continue to bring that standard to each of those games. I know there's times where when it gets like 4 o'clock, I start being like, I'm so tired, I'm tuning out. I'm like, I'll like phase in, and Keith will be giving lore, and I'll be like, wait a second, I missed the last 3 sentences. God damn it, Keith.
Honestly, my hat is off to you guys, because I knew it was late. I didn't realize it was that late for you all. And the fact that you can even stay like just awake for it is fucking amazing. Like, oh, whew. And well, I mean, it's tough. Sorry.
No, go ahead. What I was gonna say is just like sitting at a table, that element of preparing or just committing or being engaged in the game is a form of respect, not just to the DM.
I agree. I fully agree with you.
We're all here. Like, we're all spending fucking 4 hours of our lives.
Fucking important point.
And if we're gonna do that, then let's do that. Like, let's not half-ass it and, like, you know, show up and not know what anything is, not know where we were,
not what my characters can do, what my backstory is. Let's read the notes of last session.
And so one of my questions was, it seems like you guys, and you hear it a lot, this commitment level is hard to find. It really is super hard to find 4 people or 5 people that are invested in just the time to each other outside of
the dungeon master, who if a dungeon master is running a game, unless they're the one dipping out or like canceling sessions, they're so committed to what they're doing. It's rare that a DM will cancel a game. Do you know what I mean? I often find DMs are like, you know, they've put so much effort into, they're actually moving things in their schedule. They're like, no, get out of the way. I need to get to it. But,
I don't need to eat today.
I agree with you. Yeah, it's one of those weird ones that's out there. I wanted to ask about your kind of thoughts on Keith and like the whole way that he plays versus how you and I have just talked about our styles. Because I know something that, like, things that I've assessed from Keith is we very rarely make any checks of anything when we're role playing, which I both love and kind of hate at the same time. I'm like, I want to be able to upper hand you through the mechanics, but also I appreciate that you're letting me just completely have to think about this and role play you through this situation. So there's some dynamics I really love and other parts of it that I'm less of a fan of, but I wanted to get your opinion on Keith and what you think.
I I think Keith is a master storyteller. I don't think you can do what he's done without having that. But yeah, there's I feel like I do very few checks, and I had that same thought. I'm like, wow, we're never doing any checks, like, which is, I mean, it's fine. Like we're still having a good time, but like, yeah, like there's been a couple moments where like, I think this is just a full-on assumption. I feel like when you leave things up to the dice, like it can totally change your story. Like if you're like, all right, did you seduce the guard? Roll for it. It's like, oh shit, I don't actually know. Like it depends on how this dice lands. And I feel like sometimes with this, and maybe because it is a playtest, I feel like Keith is kind of using that DM power of like, you don't need to roll for it because I want the story to go this way. Which is interesting. I think it's I love what Keith's doing. He's honestly, it's been probably one of the most unique DM styles I've ever had to play with, because I don't think I've ever played with a DM who has fully inhabited and completed a world. Like because Keith and Jess, like, this is everything in this world they have made up over the past like 10 years. So it's amazing. But I feel like kind of what we were talking about earlier, like that is a definite advantage for a DM to just know like the inner workings of everything. But I feel like sometimes it's gotten in the way. Like there'll be times like, I want to do this, and he's like, well, okay, that actually doesn't work that way because this history and this king did this thing in this place, and that means you can't do this, but you didn't know that, so I'm going to explain this to you. And like he's not wrong about it, but I feel like every once in a while, because they have so much love and time put into like creating this world, I feel like sometimes for us as the players to just fuck around, he's like no, that's not the way it works. Like, which is fine. It is wild the amount of lore they've put into it. Like when that fucking pig god came up, I was like, oh my gosh. And I get to see it in his eyes. He was like, I have been waiting for this moment, and here's all the lore about it. And I was like, oh.
Dude, two things stand out to me that have been really highlighted. One is his commitment to certain characters, and it's not just the background of the character.
I have Rakulara's voice in my head. I had it in my head for fucking days. I couldn't get it out. I was like, God damn it, Keith, what have you done?
He did so good. Yeah. And then that fucking Rapippy guy, goddamn.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the one. The other dude is the way he was able to build suspense. On that last scene was masterful. Like, oh my God. The foreboding that we had. We trusted that town so freaking blindly. It was so funny. And just how each page turned to, I don't know if this is right. I'm starting to think it isn't right. Oh fuck. I'm now starting to become certain it isn't right. And then all of a sudden it's like, we're in big fucking trouble. Like that was so nicely presented that it built like emotional, organic, like discomfort in us all, that we were actually like panic, chatting in like,
yeah. So I think for me, like I want to first of all, I want to say this with all the respect. We're dissecting Keith at this point because we're looking at all the aspects of what Keith does. Everything that we say comes with zero offense. Keith is, again, of course, has taught me so much about DMing in the time that I've spent with him, especially like Tom said, his suspense and his character work. His character work truly astounds me in of how he can adopt a character and like really, really connect with it and go that place. Pull out amazing voices and all that great stuff. But I agree with you. There's parts of it where, for me, I'm dyslexic, so visualization is a big part for me. So when I describe, same.
It's awful.
And so I need just like, especially if we're doing theater of the mind combat, I need harsh borders and descriptions of where the fuck things are and what's happening. Now, don't get me wrong. Again, like you said, Keith is doing this for the plot. More like for Keith, you can tell plot and story
and playtest. This is fucking leading to something that's beyond our campaign. It's leading to a further objective that has less to do with us and more to do with that world. So I get that fully.
I fully agree with that as well. But I think there's definitely times like in the combat where, for example, when we were running through the forest, I was like, I have no clue what our order is at this point. I was like, I do not know. And then there was a point where you and Rapipi and Blake were talking, and me and Kayla were here, and these guys were meant to be in the village. And then somehow we ended up in the same place. And I was like, what? Definitely lost. Then a couple times in the barn, there were some moments where I was like, I swear you were here last round of combat, and we've suddenly things have shifted a little bit. But again, like I said, Keith values plot and story so much that it almost doesn't even matter in some of those moments, and I haven't been too fussed. For me as well, the checks thing, I actually have our players make a decent amount of checks. I'm pretty strong with like, if there's a chance that you're gonna mess up here, the moment it comes to there's a possibility, I'm like, cool, you're making a check. If you're backflipping off of a boat, you're making a check. If you're trying to hide or trying to cast a spell even, I'll be like, you're doing a sleight of hand check, because if you're walking and you're trying to secretly cast a spell and it's got somatic or verbal components, I've got like, someone might see you fucking doing this shit, you know, while you're walking. So, you know, I really value the checks and stuff. And so, and for example, something that I think you said that is probably the biggest truth about the checks with Keith's games is the keeping it on a consistent path. Because for example, in our game last night, I run this event, our pirate king is like, here is this half of this gem that is the most powerful gem in the world. I have it. I'm going to rule all of you. Fuck you, Imperial daimios. Fuck you, Mafia Don. I'm out of here, basically. And as he's leaving, the players had this, and talk about like moments that you can feel as like players as well as characters, culminates in our bard giving bardic inspiration to our dwarf and his familiar pseudo dragon, and then casting heat metal on our fucking pirate captain who wears bangles and stuff. So he drops the stone. The pseudo dragon lifts our dwarf up because they've managed to create this ability through practicing enough that he can carry the dwarf. So he carries the dwarf to the airship, puts him on. They grab the fucking stone, dip off, and I even roll a contest roll between the pirate king and the dragon to see who's going to get the stone first. They roll, they beat him easily. I'm like, all I can do at this point is the players now have half of the most powerful gem in our world. And I didn't want to have to fight you with the pirate king, but now you're going to have to fight the pirate king. And I'm like, I didn't destine this, but here we fucking are down to those dice rolls, and it's led us there. A final point that I wanted to touch on that you said is the fact that they have the world built and that they're like almost giving us all this stuff and allowing us to really like interact with this full and complete world that they have. Something that I think I value at my table at this point. Don't get me wrong, I'm going to really enjoy when my setting is complete. I'm going to be really happy because at that point, I will know the corners of the world. I will know the political grievances. I will know the, who's where, when, blah, blah, blah. But for me, something that I love is having my rogue be like, oh, yes, I've seen that before. And me be like, look across the table and be like, have you? And then be like, oh, yeah, because the Imperials come to my island, a lot where I grew up. I would have seen that. And I'm like, of course you would have. So what that means, you would know this, kind of thing. And allowing them to build stuff is something I really, really like, actually. It's something I really, really enjoy, but it's definitely, I think, something that not always DMs allow. What's your thought on the building as you go, as opposed to having completed stuff?
I was literally just talking about this last night with one of my very good friends. If you haven't met Nick from Scry Society yet, literally, amazing person. He played in Keith's last time, right before us. Nick's been DMing for years, just a really good dude. yeah, sir, I'll try to tag you guys in something similar on Twitter and be like, oh, both these people are amazing people. But we were literally just talking about this last night because, and I feel like a lot of this comes from the improv actor background, like the performer first, because it kind of goes to me, the whole idea of like backstory is great and it's important and it like gets your character going, but like front story is really where all the action happens. And like if you can get a player to be like oh, like no, like if you can get them to like co-create with you without even really realizing it, like then for them that moment and that nugget of truth is going to be like so powerful. So like if you can, I think I am like a huge supporter of that. I think that is what D&D is actually, is those moments when together, you as the DM, you as the leader, the whatever, however you want to say it, like the narrator of the story, you as the narrator and with your players, if you can work to create something together that exists in your story, like that is like pure magic in my opinion, because people, you always want your players to be invested, obviously. And if they can create something, if they can have a voice and have an agency to be like, oh, I not just as a character, as a hero, but as a physical person in the real world, have like impact on this story and on this world. Like if they can create and have that agency, they're going to be so invested in your game. And it like, I don't care who the hell you are. You can be Matt Mercer, you can be Steven Spielberg, you can be whoever, you can be the most creative person in the world. I don't care how creative you are, someone's always going to have a more creative idea than you. So if you're like, I as the DM, I've made this whole awesome world of lizard people who live underneath the sand, and it's like, that's cool. But then it's like, well, now that you have that bit of like a lead, like what can you add to that? Like how can you make this situation better? And I think that like if you can give your players that moment, and I try to do this a lot on our show, it's like I'll start to describe something, or I'll start to talk about something, and then I'll just be like, hey, well, what do you guys think about this? Or what do you guys, how would your character interact with this? How would you do this? And then from those moments, it just, I'll like set the framework, and then I love when players flesh out the world, basically. That
I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. A classic one I do is you walk in and you see a figure. What does he look like?
Oh yeah.
To one of my players, you see a half orc figure in the corner. What does he look like as you're looking at him? Belladonna or whatever. But so I do it with locations as well. I built a city. I had all the main locations. I'm like, cool. I've got the key points that they're gonna go see for sure. And then the bard is like, I want to go learn about this city. Library, please. I was like, library. Library.
Course.
Yeah. Yes. There's one uptown, of course. And they have have a specter staff that are all satyrs that walk around, that are librarians, and and there's a restricted section, and and it's one of those things
you
that
wouldn't have come up with it.
I wouldn't have come up with it. And actually, when Lauren goes into library, she's like, as I'm looking around, I'm like kind of looking past the librarian's shoulders. Do I see any restricted areas or things where I could find juicy information? I'm like, roll for me. Let's see. She's like 17. I'm like, somewhere off in the back, you can see a dark sign kind of, and you're like, and that's what I kind of really, I really, really value and really, really love. It's nice to meet someone who is on the same page as me in terms of that. It's very, very cool and interesting. I think,
and you know what? Here's what I would say.
Go on.
Maybe 5 years ago, we might have been in that creative arc of the UO story. But now, if you took your setting and fast forwarded 7 or 8 or 9 years and had fleshed it out to the extent that we're playing in, then the perspective changes a little bit, because now you're just play testing those areas. You're rigor testing. Does this pathway work? Do these characters work? Is the stat block sort of fitting with the scenario?
All this stuff. They're not playtesting for a stream. They're playtesting to make a setting, which is different. For that, you need all the lore. You need to know everything. You need to know all that. And an actual play podcast, I mean, shit, if a DM really wanted to, all you need is a starting village and your first plot hook, and then you go from, and then just build from there. Like really, if you want to strip it back and make it as easy as possible for you as a DM, you know, in terms of preparation.
That's kind of how I prep, honestly. Like I when I first started, I was trying to plan out every angle and every, I'm like, oh, you gotta, the whole, like the meme of Zach Galifianakis and the calculations and stuff, like tried that, did not work. And then I started, you guys actually had them on at one point. I think it was, Sly Flourish.
Yeah.
I think they did, or they, at least they helped making a book called The Lazy Dungeon Master.
Yeah.
And that is, ever since I read that, I was like, okay, this is much more of like a flexible approach to it. And just the idea of like, kind of what you said, like, here's a couple points, here's a couple secrets, here's a couple things in this village. Oh, the library, of course. Yeah. Okay, cool. That we can make this plot hook that I kind of had now happen in the library. Like I think that's like what you were saying. I resonate with that, because it definitely, prepping in more of like a light way like that, I think is actually more beneficial for at least the way we DM. Like maybe not Matt Mercer.
I agree with you as well, and it's interesting. I actually we've heard the term pantsers and planners. Some people do it by the seat of their pants, other people plan, and I started as a planner,
just like you,
massive,
same.
to the point where I had like documents and documents, scripted stuff I was gonna say. What the fuck? I'm like, I didn't even get close to saying some of that stuff. You know, and eventually you realize, and I showed, because I have one of my players who's wanting to DM his first one shot soon, and he's asking me, he's got an idea, and he's asking me like how to write the one shot and stuff. And I said to him, look, do you want to see my notes for the session that we just ran? Like, I have notes for the session we just ran. I showed him, and I have, this is what I had for the entire event that we just ran, is one paragraph. And then my second paragraph is what is possibles for what you would have done if we completed the combat and you guys got out of combat with like completely unscathed and whatnot. Everything else, I was gonna fucking make up on the spot. I'm like, it's just shit that I pull out of my fucking, I know enough about my world at this point and what I wanted to happen that I've paraphrased it into notes, and I just know, like, off of that bullet point, cool, this is gonna happen, that's gonna happen, you know, bing, 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 bing. And again, it's, I think a test of a true DM is really that ability to work with that and flow with that and kind of grow and expand and change and do all that stuff. Something that you know, I definitely hadn't considered when I started. And I think it's something that as the learning curve happens, you begin to learn that more and more.
Oh, absolutely.
The more you do it. I wanted to throw one final kind of question to you as we'll begin rounding this off. Cool, for me, and I'll present mine. We'll go round, and I'll go first. I want to ask what everyone, if you were the dungeon master of a table, who is your dream table of people that if you could have like Apex role players at your table to be like, I would really love to see that dynamic and see them and be able to DM for them. Who's your Apex team of predators? I would say, let's go up to maybe 6 people. For me, I would definitely go with Lou Wilson from Fantasy.
So you're going with actual
people. Yeah. So I would.
We also can I just say,
go for it?
Can we also bring in like any character actors that we think would be amazing?
Sure. Of course. I'm okay with that. Okay. So I'm gonna go with Lou Wilson from Dimension 20. I'm gonna go with Travis Willingham because I just can't be him. I take you, David. I'd actually take Jess Penley as well. 100% would take Jess. I take my mate Ryan because he's one of the best improv people I've ever seen. And then if I were to pull like a random number out of a hat, if I were to like really think across all the other shit that I've watched and things that people who I think would be really, really good. I don't know. There's some great actors that are really fun and really boppy. I think Michael Cera would be fucking hilarious in a D&D game.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, I think, you know, someone from like that group, you know, like the Michael Cera, the Jonah Hill, the Jay Rochelle, like one of those guys I think would be very interesting to slot in as my final bit of comedy onto the table. But that's for me. What about you?
No, I'm gonna pass it to you.
Okay, go for it.
What comes to mind for you?
Let's see. Oh man, it's such a good question. I mean, I feel like we've said before on on the show, Dwayne the Rock Johnson, but I'm gonna move away from that for this one. I just feel like any WWE wrestler would make an amazing D&D. They're always welcome. If anyone's listening, come to my table. I want to DM you. But I actually think I probably have Travis as well, just because I love Travis. Think he's amazing. I think it would be really, really cool to see probably Griffin McElroy at that table as well.
Yeah.
And then probably Jess is really freaking good. Like Jess is so good. But I would probably take another person, if y'all haven't met her, Shannon Robichard from Paradise RPG. Have you guys met?
No.
Shannon's amazing. She phenomenal at everything she does. Shannon. So I take Travis, Griffin, Shannon. Ooh. Oh dang! This question always gets me. Then I think I would take one of my probably like my improv trainer from Orlando. His name is Richard Regan Paul. He's an amazing actor, amazing,
Nice,
great dude. So Travis, Griffin, Shannon, Richard, probably Andy. I would say probably nice. Andy. I think Andy's good in there. And then the final person, I feel like Will Smith could do like an amazing job being some sort of D&D person.
I feel like he brings a level of sass that almost all tables kind of need. I'm right there for that. And actually, I might have my first dungeon master as well. My old drama teacher from school. I might rotate him out for one of mine.
As you guys are talking, I'm starting to lean towards like maybe comedian. So I think Kevin Hart would be fun.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I think like Theo Vaughn, who's a comedian, is like sort of a fringe comedian, and he's just some of his random
bullshittery.
His bullshittery is on point. And then I probably go back to like old school,
or even like English. What about English comedians as well, like John Richardson and people like those guys from 8 out of 10 Cats and whatnot?
Exactly. Like the improv, like serious improv. Like I think Will Ferrell has sort of gone out of favor, but like prime peak Will Ferrell,
Step Brothers. Will Ferrell. Oh my god! If you could get Step Brothers, or even like Anchorman Will Ferrell.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That kind of feel would be a fun table.
Paul Rudd as well would be a great.
Oh my gosh! Did you know that when they were shooting Anchorman? Sorry, a little bit of random trivia. It was so improvised. They actually were able to cut an entire other movie out of the outtakes called "Wake Up Ron Burgundy." And it's on YouTube, and it is the wildest shit I've ever seen in my entire life.
I love it. I do. Yeah. Honestly, that movie is truly one of my favorite. I used to have a joke since becoming much more woke in my later years as a young jockey, 17, 18-year-old. I used to say every man must own a copy of Anchorman. It's a fact. Every man has to own a VHS or a DVD copy of Anchorman.
I agree. It's a hilarious movie. It's a bit risky in a few parts, but it's fucking hilarious.
It's fucking great. So we'll start rounding this off. It's been absolutely incredible. Yeah. First of all, I feel like there's so much more to talk about. I feel like we're gonna have to have you back on at some point. I
will come back whenever you want me to.
And continue jabbering with you. But this has been absolutely incredible, and more than anything, such an honor. Like I said, Tom and I have been like kind of swooning over you from afar with playing with you and your stream and your podcast and everything. We've just been big fans and appreciating you from afar. And actually, when we found out the UO playtest, we were invited, and then they created the Discord channel, and I saw who was playing. I saw your name, and I was like, oh! I literally said so. I was like, oh my god, David Tilstra's in here. I was like, no way. I was like, this is fucking crazy, Tom.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. That means the world. Thank you.
No, of course. Here, I'll pass it over to you. Shout out where people can find you, where they can support you, and where they can get involved with Far From and all that.
Yeah. So everybody, hello. Thank you for tuning in today. It was very Yeah. My name is David Tilstra, and you can find myself at David Tilstra, like pretty much everywhere. And then you can find my show, or not my show, the show that I help run, From Afar Podcast, at From Afar Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. And we just started a TikTok, which I think is also at From Afar Podcast, and our website is at From Afar Podcast. So pretty much at From Afar Podcast across the board, you'll be able to find us. Nice. And yeah, no, I've been looking forward to this ever since you guys messaged me. I was like, oh yes, this is gonna be so much fun. So this has been amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I admire both of you greatly, and I hope that we can in the future work more and more and more together, and even off air, just as friends, because
100%.
The feeling is very mutual, David.
Very mutual. And I'll tell you a little secret. I don't mind saying this either. We were hoping to make you our 50th podcast because we felt like it was a huge honor and such a pleasure. However, we had someone hop in at the last minute to book a podcast, and so we released them as number 50. So you're actually going to be number 52, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
But honestly, we can't tell you how much we appreciate you, and this has just been such an honor. For us here, we've been Homie and the Dude, father and son. Father and Son podcast, and MMA TTRPG.
Love it.
Check us out if you want NPCs. We have a website out now, guys. You can find our website. It's Homie and the Dude. We have all of our videos on there. We have all our amazing NPCs, and we will be releasing our first NPC pack very, very soon. So keep your eyes peeled for fully statted, fully high-res art, custom tokens, and new spells, magic items, and features across all those characters as well. So super excited to drop all of that. But otherwise, support us with the Holy Trinity. Like and follow on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, and follow on Twitter. Best ways to help us out. Otherwise, been Homie and the Dude. Thank you, David.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, guys. This has been amazing.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching Homie and the Dude today. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit us with the Holy Trinity. Go follow us on Twitter, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and like the Facebook. It's the best way that you can help us out at the moment. Hope you have an awesome day. Thanks for watching, guys.